everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, CEO of C Model Data, and today we have an extraordinary guest who is revolutionizing how businesses connect through video. Beth is the Chief Executive Officer at Animoto. Beth has a wealth of experience in SaaS, video technology, and marketing strategy, and she's here to share her insights on enhancing customer engagement through video. Beth, welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to have you here today. I'm wondering if you can start by telling us more about Animoto and the vision that you have for the company.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you and your audience. So just want to get that out of the way first. So yeah, I'm the CEO at Animoto, and Animoto is really looking to democratize video creation and enhance the way that businesses and teams communicate through video. So it's our mission to make it easy for anybody to create video. Video can be a really daunting, challenging task, and some of the tools that you are out there using can be really complex. And Animoto seeks to make it really easy to create video, but also collaborate with your team so you can communicate better in that video creation process.
I love that. I cannot tell you how many times I have started on projects like, I'm going to knock this out. And then I get through and I'm like, I can't do this. This is really complex. You need special skills to deal with this video. So, Beth, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned using frameworks to remove emotional bias when you're making decisions. Can you walk us through a little bit about how your decision making has evolved in this process?
One of the things that I've found in my career is that a lot of times decisions are driven by fear. They're driven by passion, about somebody having real passion about what they're doing. They're often driven by those emotions that maybe aren't necessarily, rational at the time, let's say. So you want to kind of my idea is I want to step back away from something. I mean, there's been situations where I had really big decisions in front of me. And I was like, I'm not even going to think about this today. I'm going to wait till tomorrow. And then that following day, I sat down, I started doing pros and cons. I started scoring things. What seems great about this opportunity? What are the risks? So I really try to do a bunch of different frameworks. So it depends on the decision, right? Sometimes the frameworks are easy. Is this a reversible decision or not? That's the first kind of thing that you're going to go to is let's understand if this is a high stakes or low stakes decision. Then you move into more assessing, because you got to understand what opportunities are between one another. Which one should we go after and try to prioritize? So then I usually use some sort of scoring matrix that really takes a lot of this activity out of it and really starts to break it down and understand what the opportunity cost is of doing one thing versus another and which one seems better for the business. As I was coming up through Animoto, there were a lot of decisions that seemed to be made over, in my early years there that were made because a singular person felt a certain way about something.
Okay, come on. Yes.
I saw this happen time and time again. And as a former entrepreneur and business owner, I was like, well, this is not the way that I made decisions in my business. I had to think about the business. Is this going to drive new revenue in new markets? Is this going to actually increase engagement, retention? Is this a differentiator in the market? So at the time, I was standing up product marketing in our organization. So I set up a tiering framework in a real simple scoring methodology to really understand is this good for the business? And I used our core metrics to set up the scoring framework. Again, is this going to drive new revenue in new markets? Is this a differentiator? Is this going to drive engagement and retention? Is this going to drive adoption? Because these are the things I knew that were important to our business. And so I just said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Every initiative we're thinking about or feature we're thinking about building, we're going to actually use this tiering framework. And all you have to do is answer, is it going to drive new revenue in new markets? Yes, no, maybe. 1, 2, 3. Every gets a score. Same thing. Is this a differentiator? Yes, no, maybe. Is this going to drive upsell or cross sell? Yes, no, maybe. So then we'd score everything. And then I had sort of set tiers out of like, okay, which one are like really big business movers for us? And so then we were able to sort of look at things. And the interesting thing is once I got everybody aligned that we were going to do this exercise and tier all the things that we had on our roadmap, suddenly
Bet some stuff dropped off.
some things came off of the roadmap.
Bet they did.
100%.
Yeah.
People were like, wow, oh, I didn't realize how little impact this was actually going to have on the and so it was a real eye opener for that. But it was, it took me a while. I had to, getting alignment and getting people to stakeholders to come on board with something like that. But I think in the end, like people really saw like, okay, these are the metrics that are important to the business. And
Yeah.
let's figure out if this is going to move the needle for us.
Number one, this is the business that C model is in, so I love it. But I really appreciate how you just simplified for our audience that we go to work, we work in a business, but it's really the business that's at stake. It's not about us. And so I like this concept because when you first started talking about, oh, remove emotional bias, well, how do I do that? Well, it's not about you, right? It's really about, are we growing the business? Is this right? It's like a simple question at the end of the day. Does this make sense for the business? Whether or not it impacts you is not necessarily at the tip top. Now, of course, we don't want our employees to be disgruntled or unhappy, but certainly I love the metrics driven view around decisions. So that was really, really a really good intro, really good way to take your first step. Now, you made a career pivot in your mid 40s from entrepreneur to corporate executive. How did that transition change the way that you approach strategic decisions? Were there these moments where your entrepreneurial instincts clashed with corporate processes?
100%. So let's also make it clear that I didn't just jump into corporate executive. I came in to Animoto as an IC. So I was an IC in marketing. And so I worked my way up. It really changed because when I was an entrepreneur, a small business owner, I had a small staff. I had a staff of about 5, but really, a lot of that was just like I made decisions. I made it somewhat in a vacuum, move the business forward in different ways. And when I got to a more of a corporate environment, I realized there are stakeholders. I've got to get alignment. I've got to get people on board with the things that I think are important. And so it really shaped because before I didn't have to do that. I was kind of working in this silo of myself and like, here's what the business needs to do. And, most of the people that were working for me were assistants or had very distinct jobs. As part of running the business, it really changed how I had to think and it wasn't always easy. So for me, it was like sort of a puzzle, which I love, to be honest with you. I like problem solving. So it was really like how to gain buy-in, get your message across and have people hear your story. Also, a lot of times I found, which was a little different, you can't just come in and say like, I see it this way, we should do it this way, let's go, because that's not the way to get buy-in. So I found out like people had to learn the same things that I was learning to come to the same realization. And again, back to a lot of those frameworks and how we make decisions, but also how we research and assess opportunity. So really getting everybody on the same page about why this is important, what do we think it's going to drive, and things like that, and what are the risks. We had to learn a lot of diplomacy, a lot again, and I really did lean on the frameworks for a way of thinking to showcase where I came to my ideas. One of the things that's always been really great and I tell my team to do is like, okay, tell me 3 ways we could approach this and tell me why you chose the decision you made and what what are the other opportunities you considered? So then you can really see like how somebody's actually worked through something.
You'd be surprised at how many people are not as open to that level of transparency. A lot of times for fear of rejection, fear of "Oh, I didn't get something right." But the truth is, it's better for us to collaborate from your starting point than starting over. So it's okay if you didn't come to the absolute 100% right conclusion, but let's get together and build from there.
Yeah.
How do you look at this same situation and really balance consensus building with the speed that you actually need to make decisions with, especially um, balancing the difference between when you were an entrepreneur and now that you're in corporate? How do you balance that?
It's tough. And I think in the early part of my career, it was a lot harder. It took me months in a different position. It's a little quicker, but it is tough. So again, really trying to break it down and understand with the information you have. So constantly talking to the team about decisions. Okay, can we get to 70% confidence on this? Because a lot of times we don't have all the information. And that's where people get really uncomfortable. I think the other thing is I really champion a culture and I say there is no failure, only learnings. So I don't want people to fear because you are going to fail. I learned early on, I was on a growth team as well. And so I always win every experiment we did. I wanted to be 90% right all the time. And I read a book and it said, if you're not failing 50% of your tests, you're not trying hard enough. And that really sort of changed the lens of how I thought. So I sat with our acquisition leader not too long ago, and I was like, "What if we really like stretch to learn faster? Are we being too safe here?" And I think if we make this more dramatic change, we can learn at a lot more rapid pace. And so, again, trying to give people a culture where there's transparency, but fear doesn't drive their decision making, right?
So one of the things that I'm hearing is having transparency is one level of this, but this concept of learn faster is a big one. So audience, I hope you got this nugget and not being too safe. I actually think that I take that away as I can't really foster that transparency without also building up your ability to learn faster, fail faster, right? Pick things up and not and really experiment more heavily is what I'm getting out of that.
Yeah.
That's good. I want to switch gears just a little bit. As someone who literally captured moments through photography, how does visual storytelling, how does this actually influence your strategic decisions at Animoto? Do you see decisions differently?
That's an interesting question. Um, I think for me, as a visual learner and someone that understands the importance of visual storytelling, I think that's why I got drawn into video because it was like another medium to tell your story. And it's really important. I think the biggest thing that that I've taken away from that is collective decision making and how to bring an entire group of people on board. So leveraging the creativity and leveraging where they are. Some people are language learners, some people are visual learners. I'm definitely more of a visual learner, and I'm definitely, again, like I like frameworks and I like sort of things that you can visualize and see because it helps people see something in a different way. So I constantly leverage those to not only explain our product, but explain the decisions that we're making, simplify things into a real visual. Like, here's where we are, here's where the competitors are, here's where we want to move. This is all on a four up matrix to understand sort of where we're going. And I think it helps people see why we want to make the decisions that we're making.
Yeah, critical piece. It's the why. Why? Why is this happening? Why are we doing this? Our audience, I want you to think about a time when you transitioned between radically different roles. How did it change your decision making? Share your experiences using Dynamic Decisions podcast. Let's move forward. I want you to. One of the things we did was you emphasized the importance of direct customer feedback when we were talking. What's your process for incorporating customer voice into high stakes product decisions? Can you maybe give us an example where a customer insight trumped internal data?
Customer insight trumped internal data. I think one of the things, so again, coming up through product marketing and was key for me. I think the other thing is before I came to Animoto, I was a user. So I felt like, number one, I was the target audience when I was my small business, running my small business. I used the product and understood that. So I think the thing is data will tell you one thing and you can make a hypothesis based on that data. And I love data and trying to figure out what it means. But a lot of times you can't contextualize that. And so that's where that customer feedback is so important. I still go out and stand on a trade show floor because in a few hours of being on a trade show floor, I can hear more about what people want and learn a whole lot faster about what they need, what they're trying to do, what their situation is. And so, to me, data can only give you so much. Again, you can make a hypothesis, but you have to combine that also with user stories to really understand and contextualize why behind that.
Awesome insight for this audience. Use customer feedback to contextualize your data.
Yes.
That is a piece to take away and something that I think any business owner who's in a growing organization can do. You kind of touched everything when you were an entrepreneur. How do you prioritize now? Which metrics actually drive your decisions? What do you ignore that others might just obsess over?
What do I ignore? Again, I think aligning the company on what are the key metrics we're trying to move, what's the most important for the business today. Like, for example, right now we're solving challenges in really adoption and trying to grow our awareness and top of funnel. So you have to say, I want engagement and retention, but right now that is not our top priority because this is what's going on in the market. This is what's going on in our business. And these are the problems that we need to solve today. So it can be hard, but it can be a huge distraction if you're trying to solve 5 problems and not solving one. The other thing I see off of that is everything we're doing, I'm like, what's the primary metric we're going to move? How are we going to measure success? Because I find people want to come in and they want to say, like, okay, we're going to do this initiative and here are the 10 different metrics we're going to look at to see if it's successful. And I'm like, and you're not going to know because those 10 metrics are important. You need to understand what's the primary thing you're trying to move because some things are too far down the funnel or too far down the action you're trying to change. They're important to contextualize, to understand, to make sure that risks or counter metrics, but there's one metric you want to move. So that's just really important in my opinion.
So there's one metric you're trying to move and one that needs to not be moved past a certain point. So like I need to grow my revenue and I need to keep my expenses at a certain amount. So
Counter
so
metric. Exactly. That counter
that's good.
metric is important.
So you mentioned product departments operating in silos when you joined Animoto. How do you break down those kinds of barriers? What sort of decision-making structures did you put in place to kind of foster cross-functional collaboration?
That was again really tough. When I joined Animoto, um, it felt like at the time they didn't have a product marketing team. So a lot of times like this product decisions were made in a silo, to be honest with you. And then it was marketing was somewhat of an agency. And it's like, okay, we've made this feature now go sell it. When you're going to go sell something, you need to understand what the motivators are. Why is this important to the customer and all this? So what I saw when I came in, it was causing contention because like they would bring something and say, like, take this to market. And then you'd start asking all these questions to contextualize and understand, okay, well, tell us what users were telling you. Why was this important? What was the motivation? What challenges were they running? What problem space were you solving? And then they were like, what do you mean? It came up as an affront, like we didn't trust what they were doing. So I sat down with a few of the product leaders and I'm like, look, this is not challenging your decision, but these are the things that we need to know to actually sell something. So I started educate them on like product marketing and why it was important and how product marketers think and how marketers have to think in order to sell something and why all these questions are important. And so I did start championing within the organization that marketing needs to be in earlier in these conversations so we can get that context earlier. Then somewhat evolved to getting marketing in the decision. I also pointed out to, executive leadership on how things can be more difficult. Product in marketing doesn't have that voice earlier in that decision-making process. They are a stakeholder. And so it was a two-part side. But again, that framework that I talked about, the tiering framework, that was the one that really changed and got everybody on the same page about what was changing our business. If I had to say what were the early diplomatic things in order to break down walls and barriers and get product and marketing talking earlier and creating that alignment, it was having conversations, asking how they felt, put myself in their shoes, and then try to also help put them in my shoes and my team's shoes on how hard it was to do our job without this information. So really trying to build some empathy across those two teams so we can each understand each other's perspective and then work on it together.
I think that that's a critical element in trying to make sure that everyone who's involved is completely aligned. We're going to move into my favorite part of this, which is this little exercise where I assess your decision-making persona. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions, and you're going to have between 0 and 100% to say, yep, I identify with that, between 0 and 100%, but you only get up to 100%. Okay. And you have to keep track. And so each one of the 4 questions represents a persona of decision making. So the question is asked in the way of that persona. Okay, here we go. So here's the first question. We're considering this new video strategy. How do we ensure that it aligns with Animoto's core values in enhancing the customer experience?
Say probably 70%, 75. I mean, I'm fine with it. Is it
Okay.
the most valuable one? I have to see the other questions. I might,
You might want to change this one once you hear some of the
right?
others.
Because I like when I hear that, I'm like, well, but I really need to understand if it's moving the business forward.
Exactly. So that one is actually called the feeler. And so the feeler is highly intuitive and leverages a lot of gut feel. All right, let's move to the next one. So we're reflecting on last year's video marketing initiatives. What specific trends or insights have we uncovered that can significantly influence our next strategies?
Say I identify that probably 90%.
Okay, now you only get 100%. And
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. You get 100% total across all of them.
Yep. Let me get a piece of paper out here. Number 1, we got values and customer experience. And then, marketing initiatives and what we do next, right?
What
Yeah.
trends and insights have we uncovered that can significantly
I
influence?
I got you. Okay. I misunderstood the challenge. This is wanna hear all the questions, and then I'll give you my percentage breakdown. Is that okay?
That is okay. And I so this is so funny. I started to do it that way, and I find that different people like it different ways. This just goes to show you the human piece of communication is so interesting. Some people like it that way, and some people are like, oh, just break each one down. Here we go. I'll give you the next 2. So that one, the second one was called the planner persona. So here's your next one. So we're evaluating previous video campaigns. What key lessons have we learned that have fundamentally changed our decision making? That's called the counter persona.
Okay.
Okay. And then here's the last one. We're formulating these new video strategies. What specific data points are we going to rely on to validate our decisions?
Alright, that was a
That's the one you've been waiting on. Right.
that's the one. That's the one.
Yes. So that one is called the data driver.
Okay, and I've got 100, right?
Yep, you get 100 across them all. So yeah, let us know what you got.
I would say ooh, this is tough. I would say oh, this is gonna be interesting. I can't wait to hear what you come up with. I would say 50% on data.
Okay.
I would say 20% on the, counter,
Okay.
and 15 each for the feel and the trends.
So you are 15% feeler, 15% planner, 20% counter, and 50% data driver. Here's the thing, there's no right answer. But knowing this about yourself does impact your leadership, right? And also does impact how do you get to balanced decision making in at least 90% of the time? And a lot of times we don't recognize that even in each decision, there could be a different balance of those numbers that sticks out, right? So if you're dealing with a people related decision to a hire fire, you might have a lot more feeler in there, right? You might have a lot more of your expertise and experience that you lean on versus just what the data says, right? Sometimes, and this is why I really loved your point earlier about using customer data, mixing your qualitative and quantitative data in order to really drive to your hypothesis or to your results. That was really, really good stuff. I have one more question for you, and it's that if you could give one piece of advice to aspiring leaders in your industry, the video marketing and technology industry, what would that advice be?
Probably the most important thing is to create clarity. Clarity then it unlocks potential in people by having clarity. When people understand, like, to me, it's like an operational necessity. So if people understand the goals, values, how we operate, what we're trying to achieve, they have all the tools they need to set them up for success so they can make decisions. And so that's so important. And I've been in situations where there isn't clarity and it just causes a lot of whiplash, a lot of changing decisions. It's stressful on your employees. So, really, clarity. I think the other thing I value a lot is transparency. So, transparency is important as well because we're all in this together trying to make decisions to move the business forward. If we don't have all the same information, we can't make the right decision or we can't understand what is the most important thing we need to focus on. So I think clarity is super important, but I think slowly after that becomes transparency to create alignment on what we need to do. I saw early on teams when they were again trying to move multiple metrics, the team wasn't aligned and it caused friction on the team because it didn't open up the right kind of debate where people could actually feel like we're working towards the same thing. We're on the same team. And it really creates that unity of we're all doing the same thing. If they have that clarity and they understand what the goals or objectives are, they can work together much better.
Clarity, transparency, alignment. I think if you gave our audience anything today, you gave them those three words, and not just the words, but the meaning, the expectation, and really a way for them to think a little bit differently about how those things can help to actually move the needle. Beth, I thank you so much for your insightful advice today. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. This experience that you've shared with us to me has been super meaningful. Can you share with our listeners where they can learn more about you and Animoto?
Yeah, you can go to animoto.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn at Beth Forester. That's where you can reach me.
To our listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate it, share it with your network. Let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, we want you to keep growing, keep leading with purpose. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I really had a great time.